The unfortunate fact about physics is the takeoff is easier than the landing.
Yeah,
It
yes.
seems. And you mentioned Starship. One of the incredible engineering feats that you get to see is the reusable rockets that take off, but they land, and they
Mm,
land uh, using control, and they do so perfectly. And
mm.
sometimes when it's synchronous, it's beautiful to see. And then with Starship, you see the the chopsticks that catch the ship. I mean, there's just so much incredible engineering. But you mentioned Starships is somehow helpful here. So, what's your hope with Starship? What kind of science might it enable,
Mm.
possibly?
There's two things. I mean, it's the launch cost itself, which is hopefully going to mean per kilogram, it's going to dramatically reduce the cost if it's the sort of the level. Even if it's a factor of 10 higher than what Elon originally promised, this is going to be a revolution for the cost to launch. That means you could do all sorts of things. You could launch large telescopes, which could be basically like JWST, but you don't even have to fold them up. JWST had this whole issue with its design that it's 6.5 meters across. And so there's no fuselage, which is that large at the time. The Ares 4 wasn't large enough for that. And so they had to fold it up into this kind of complicated origami. And so a large part of the cost was figuring out how to fold it up, testing that it unfolded correctly, repeated testing, and there was something like 130 fail points or something during this unfolding mechanism, and so all of us were holding our breath during that process. But if you have the ability to just launch, arbitrarily large masses, at least comparatively compared to JWST, and very large mirrors into space, you can more or less repurpose ground-based mirrors. The Hubble Space Telescope mirror and the JWST mirrors are designed to be extremely lightweight,
Mhm.
and that increased their cost significantly. They have this kind of honeycomb design on the back to try and minimize the weight. If you don't really care about weight because it's so cheap, then you could just literally grab many of the existing ground-based mirrors across telescopes across the world, 4 meter, 5 meter mirrors, and just pretty much attach them to a chassis and have your own space-based telescope. I think the Breakthrough Foundation, for instance, is an entity that has been interested in doing this sort of thing. And so that raises the prospects of having not just one WST that just, WST is a fantastic resource, but it's split between all of us, cosmologists, star formation, astronomers, those of us studying exoplanets, those of us wanting to study, the ultra deep fields and the origin of the first galaxies, the expansion rate of the universe. Everyone has to share this resource, but we could potentially each have, one JWST each that is maybe just studying a handful of the brightest exoplanet stars
Mhm.
and measuring their atmospheres. This is important because we talked about this planet TRAPPIST 1e earlier. That planet, if JWST stared at it and tried to look for biosignatures, by which I mean oxygen, nitrous oxide, methane, it would take it of order of 200 transits to get even a very marginal, what we'd call 2.5 sigma detection of those, which basically nobody would believe with that. And 100 transits, I mean, this thing transits once every 6 days. So you're talking about sort of 4 years of staring at the same star with one telescope. There'd be some breaks, but it'd be hard to schedule much else because you have to continuously catch each one of these transits to build up your signal to noise. And so JWST is never going to do that. In principle, technically, JWST could technically have the capability of just about detecting a biosignature on an Earth-like planet around a non-sun-like star. But still, impressively, we have basically the technology to do that, but we simply cannot dedicate all of its time practically to that one resource. And so Starship opens up opportunities like that of mass producing these kinds of telescopes, which will allow us to survey for life in the universe, which of course is one of the grand goals of astronomy.